So, Lionel, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
As I told you, we're huge fans of your Substack. We wanted to mainly talk about happiness, but before we go that way, I wanted to ask you about the title, let's say, of your Substack, because you introduced the idea of people not being rational as classic economics would, and you bring this concept of optimally irrational. And I want to, maybe for people who don't understand and maybe don't know what that is or what do you mean by that, maybe give us a little like brief introduction of what that is and how irrationality maybe can be even useful for us sometimes.
Right. Thanks for the question. Well, so I wrote a book. It's just, you can see here, just behind me, it's called Optimally Irrational, and that gave the title for the Substack as well. And it's kind of really building on the evidence from behavioral sciences, in particular behavioral economics, which over decades accumulated a lot of evidence that we didn't behave as a kind of rational model of behavior that we had, that was kind of dominant in economics like 30, 20 years ago. And in this model, I think the very intuitive way of thinking about what this model is to think of Mr. Spock in Star Trek. That is somebody very smart, not very emotional. He doesn't have all human emotions. He's very good at mathematics. He's not a bad person, but he's very self-centered. He's not a social guy. You're not going to have lots of beers at the pub with this guy. And economists were very happy with this model, and the psychologists were knocking at the door saying, that's not how people are. Like, we're very different. We have like emotions, fear, love, anger. We are social being. We like to have social bonds, and also we make a lot of mistakes. We're not, all like genius in math. You know what? Not all of us are going to go to math Olympiads and this kind of thing. And eventually, this kind of psychologists built a huge amount of evidence. And this amount of evidence overcame the resistance in economics. And so the pendulum went from, in economics, from we are super smart, kind of a bit like computers, to no, actually, we have lots of flaws. And, I was part of this movement. And when I was a young researcher, I really was kind of against, maybe that you would say that, but against the old model. I was working with the old psychology evidence showing that people are just richer and more complex than we assumed before. But I feel that the pendulum went too far. So after some times, I got annoyed at the hearing sometimes behavioral economists, but also maybe a lot of people working around behavioral economics summarizing the results from the discipline as we have proven that people are irrational. And to me, that couldn't be the end of a scientific discipline. Showing that people are not something is not explaining what people are. Like, it's not understanding why people do the thing they do. And so I was a bit of annoyed with this, and I was kind of accumulating ideas. And once somebody, a colleague of mine, said, yeah, there was a book opportunity, and I says, do you want to write a book? And I says, yeah, like the book was already kind of, mapped out. So I wrote this book, and optimally irrational means is to argue that a lot of the deviations, a lot of the flaws that were identified by psychologists and behavioral economists, sometimes they look like flaws, but often there are good reasons behind it. And good reasons can be that when we really understand the very complex problems we face, the fact that making perfect decisions is impossible, it's costly to be perfect. When we understand that, a lot of the flaws that were unveiled by behavioral economists can be understood actually as good solutions. There are good solutions once we understand how hard it is to make perfect decisions. And so that's the title of the book, Optimally Irrational. I kind of really cover all the field of behavioral economics, showing how a lot of these biases, they have very good explanations. And so the idea here is to kind of take a step back, and instead of accumulating cognitive flaws and limitations and seeing humans as being very riddled with problems, cognitive limitations, etc., is to say, no, actually, usually we're pretty good. It's not that we are making a lot of mistakes because we're stupid. It's like we're making lots of mistakes often because, making zero mistakes is incredibly hard. And so, I think intuitively you'll think about, like, if you have to make a choice between, it could be two flats, it could be two cars, it could be even 2 cups of coffees, you're not going to spend an infinite amount of time processing information to make sure you have the right decision. Just because at some point, you've got other things to do. So you'll accumulate information, you'll process information. But at some point you'll say, okay, you know what? I'm not really sure, but I'll make a decision because I've got to move on. And so I think these things is really pervades all our lives, and it's normal to make mistakes. It's not that we are floated. So that was the message of the book. And that's the message I started with the Substack as well.
Because thank you for that. Because I thought maybe regarding this kind of optionality, or I mean this kind of mechanisms evolved like as useful things, right? So maybe they take us towards some flaws sometimes, but they evolve for like specific useful reasons, right?
Yeah, so you're right. So I mean, I guess there's two things. A lot of the things that we do, I think the book says to understand why we behave the way we do, we have to understand the good reasons behind it. So the good reasons could be either that these are the problems that our ancestors were facing, and we have good solutions to it. Sometimes, though, the setting in which we live is very different from our ancestors. So I think if you take the kind of geological timescale, or really Homo sapiens ancestors like start something 100,000 years ago, but hominids are like 1 million years ago, or Australopithecus, etc. So it's very, very, very long. And okay, Homo sapiens 100,000 years ago, but they were living in very different environment. I mean, caves and hunter-gatherers, etc. And then if you look now, like the first cities, like 4,000 years ago, and most people were not living in cities. So the thing where most of humanity lives in cities is maybe within the last 50 years. So when you realize that, you think that if you take even just a history of humankind, kind of a blink of an eye is a recent time where we are living in the modern environment. And this modern environment, where you take the subway to go to work and you go on your laptop and you connect to your social networks, that has nothing to do with, I mean, it's very, very different from our ancestral environment. So it means that there will be a lot of adaptive kind of cognitive processes that we have that were very good for an ancient environment that are not going to be very good for, they'll create what will evolutionary mismatch. So obviously you're familiar with the most kind of obvious one is food. So our ancestors were in a very scarce food environment. Sugar was very scarce, and I think it's often now we underappreciate how food scarcity must have been kind of characterizing a lot of our ancestors. Like when you look at bones, often you find evidence of malnutrition. And malnutrition, when you are in a hunter-gatherer environment, means what you're going to get sick, you're like more likely to die. Maybe, you're less likely to have friends and allies because you're not very healthy. And, you get a cut and you get a sore, and, you don't have antibiotics. So if you get an infection and you're not very healthy, that can be crippling, etc. So I think that was the environment we were in. So if you were to find a ripe fruit with lots of sugar in it, you'd crave it because that's good for you. But now you fast forward in the modern world where simple credit card, you can easily get access to a lot of sugar in any supermarkets, kind of overly provided. And just our way of thinking or natural kind of preferences are not going to be suited for this new environment. But once you take this view, you can always understand why we behave the way we do. So yes, I go to the supermarket and I can't help put a Mars bar in my trolley. It's not because I'm stupid. It's, I can understand that. No, I have this preference because there are good reasons. There were good solutions to all problems. The thing is that we are not facing these problems anymore, but it still helps us understand why we behave the way we do. So as you say, either we understand that what's behind our decisions are good solutions to the problem we face now, or at least they were good solutions to the problem our ancestors were facing. And these problems are not anymore the same, but nonetheless, it helps us understand why we behave the way we do.
So my my question around this is, when we, like, if we go to the topic of happiness, which I wanted to talk today, are we having this kind of problem, like, not really understanding, like, uh what's behind the concept, or how we behave around the topic of happiness, or what it means happiness to us? Because I see, like, mainly the problem is that we have all these, like, different versions of what's, like, what is happiness and what's the specific method towards attaining it. Let's say, like, focusing on oneself, or developing, like, social connections, or I don't know, like, relentlessly looking for goals, or just being grateful for the thing that's happening right now, let's say. So what are we missing around that? Is there actually, like, a
Yeah.
formula, or no?
So I get there are two questions in your question. Maybe correct me if I'm right, but I think you ask, what is happiness, and is there a formula to get happiness? So I think for the first, I guess the two questions are linked. Is that we would like to know how to get. We want to be happy, and we would like to know how to get happy. And the reason we want to be happy, the first reason. Let's look at the first reason. Why do we want to be happy? What's happiness? If you go to bookshops, like the literature or the books on happiness or well-being, or self-help books are massive, and plenty of books. And if you open them, you'll find it a bit puzzling. Their kind of recommendations are multiple and not necessarily always compatible. One book will tell you the secret of happiness is to be able to self-center, to ignore the pressure from outside, to be able to say no to requests from other people. Another book will say, well, the secret of happiness is connections. It's your family, your friends, invest in that, because when you'll die, you'll say, I didn't invest enough in my friends. Another book says, well, secret of happiness, is not to be driven always by looking beyond what you have. It's like, you should be a Stoic or a Buddhist, think, appreciate what you just have now, the in the moment feeling. Just kind of experience, even physically, or the surrounding setting you're in, and appreciate that you're alive. Another book will tell you, well, the secret of happiness is to aim for the stars, shoot for the stars, and to try as hard as possible, like that you will have no regret. So when you look at these books, it's like, okay, but at first they don't tell you exactly what is happiness. It's kind of this mysterious thing. And also, the recipes don't look consistent. So it's not, is there a meta recipe which can explain the small recipes? So the on my Substack that you mentioned, I have this picture of there's the elephant and the blind. I think it's a proverb from India, I think, and where the idea is very famous. Most of your listeners, I guess, know about it. But the story is like you have several blind people trying to describe what's an elephant. And so one blind is touching the trunk and says, well, it looks like a tube and it's wet at the bottom. And another one's touched the tusk and says, it's very hard and very smooth. And another one touched, the legs as well. It's massive like a column. And so they have very different views of the elephant, but this is because they don't see the whole picture. And you can see that the people thinking about happiness, or the books about happiness, often have the same. There's a hint of truth. There's an element of truth in each of these, but what's missing is a big picture. So now if you take a step back and you ask yourself, what is happiness? We have kind of, now I think we have enough evidence in behavioral sciences and cognitive science to provide a reasonable, well-founded answer. And this answer is that everything that's in your, let's start before I give you the answer. Everything that is happening in your head has to be there for a reason. I mean, if it's not just in your head, but if it's in all our head, every regularity that you see across humans couldn't be there randomly. Things don't happen, we don't form some kind of cognitive pattern randomly. Randomness leads to things being different. So if you see a pattern which is all across humans, there has to be a reason. And this reason, it has to be that it helps our ancestors navigating the world they were in to make better decisions, to be able to survive, have offsprings, and have these offerings survive and themselves have offsprings. So every psychological pattern which seems to be universal has to have this kind of function of helping us making good decisions. So now if you look at happiness and then you start asking this simple question, what could happiness be good for? How could it help us make good decisions? Well, the simple answer is that when you face the world and you have to make decisions, it's very good to have a system of valuation, a system of subjective valuation which tells you that's good, that's bad. And that's, so now like, oh, should I do this? Well, I feel it's good, so yes. Or should I do that? Oh, I feel it's bad, I shouldn't. And at some level, we know that we have these things. Like, for instance, like if you see a snake, you don't need to think too much about it. Ancestors, even monkeys, you see, they react to the shape of a snake and they're worried about it. Monkeys also, they're worried about, the shadow which looks like an eagle. They'll be running for the trees. So we understand that this system evaluation can be useful. If you put your hand on a hot stove, you'll not like it. If you, on the contrary, have a good meal, you'll like it. But now you can extend this vision really to everything. So happiness should be a system evaluation. Happiness should be the positive values which are associated with all the kind of things which are good to help us being successful, or at least help our ancestors being successful. And so you can think about, obviously, let's start from the basic things. You don't want to be hurt, so you want to keep your physical integrity. So you don't want cuts, you don't want to be burned. You want to be in the right temperature. Okay, you don't want to be too cold, you don't want to be too warm. Then after, you want to have protection, so against dangers. You want protections maybe against other people who could be dangerous. You want to have friends. You want to have a mate. And, you enjoy having kids and look at the face of babies, etc. And then when you line all that up, it's all the things which are going to help you survive, have children, and, help your children survive, etc. And so now this is system evaluation. And that explains all the features of happiness. And we can talk about the specific features about how happiness works in details. But, that's the first big picture. But then I think you hit at an interesting puzzle. It's like, why don't we know how to get happiness? Or I guess we know a bit about how to get happiness, right? Like stay, as I say, achieve all these things I described. But still you have this kind of, it seems a bit of a mystery. And here the answer is that, nature designed us. And when I say nature design, it's a metaphor because nature is not a designer, but like the evolutionary process led to us the way we are, because it has some efficiency, some functionality. But we're not provided the rule book. In a way, evolution doesn't need to give us the rule book saying, oh, by the way, here's how the world works. You're living on planet Earth in a big universe and you're small primates. And, our happiness has this function because to maximize fitness. Nature doesn't need to give us the rule book, the meta-knowledge for us to actually achieve the goal of producing offsprings. And it's exactly the same thing as now if you were an engineer in artificial intelligence and you program a software to win at chess. Nowhere in the program you need to write, oh, by the way, you are a chess winning program. Your goal is to win at chess. And so I'm putting these lines of code to give values to the different moves on the chessboard. And the goal is for you to win at chess. You don't need to put this. You just have to put a system evaluation at each point in the game. The software will calculate what's the best value and what's the next move. And the system does just need to go one step at a time. It doesn't need to have a big plan thinking, oh, actually, beyond this one step, I have a big plan. And in the same way for us, we can move one step at a time. Today, I want, have a good lunch with my friends. I want to make sure I'm working well for my next promotion, etc., etc. I don't need to think about nature. Didn't need to put in my mind that there is a grand plan, which is for me to have, children and reproduce, etc., and etc. So that's the thing. Happiness is helping us making good decisions, but nature, evolution didn't give us the rule book, and so that's why we're puzzled, and we find it mysterious because we have to slowly work out with science and studies to try to understand, to gain this meta-knowledge which we're not given.
Lionel, Thank you very much for that explanation. It's amazing. I'm a very big fan. I'm a very big Rory Sutherland fan. Are you
Okay.
familiar with him?
Well,
Um,
I'm familiar with the fact that he works in behavioral science and he has had a lot of influence in marketing, isn't it?
yes, he's a marketing genius, and he always says that don't be afraid of asking stupid questions. So here we go.
No worries, yeah.
Why do we always want more? Is there a
No,
reason?
yeah, I think as long, it's good to ask stupid questions that, everybody has in mind and don't dare to ask. I don't think it's a stupid question. I think it's a very fundamental question. Why don't we always ask more? You, one of these books, you go in the bookshop, Secret of Happiness. Some of these books will tell you, the secret of happiness is not to want to more. It's just to enjoy what you have. And this is not a new insight. You can go back to, Epictetus in ancient Rome. Epictetus will tell you the same thing. You shouldn't aim always to have what you don't have. And Buddhism, you have the same aspects, in Oriental philosophy or spiritualism of trying to curtail all your desires. So desires of what you don't have is what creates misery. Once you are able to remove these desires, then you'll feel that you will feel, I don't know, self-fulfilled, because you don't need what you don't have. So why do you want what you don't have? Well, the short answer is that evolution is a competitive process. So it's not just our ancestors. It's like if you come from bacteria, like to all the lines of of life, there are scarce resources, and organisms are competing with other organisms from other species, but also within the species for access to resources to survive, reproduce, etc. And so there is a competitive aspect to evolution. And so if you think about our ancestors, and let's say some ancestors arrive in a place where there is no scarce resource, like it's a nice island and there are coconut trees and there's food and there are fish, and so you can just fish a bit during the day and do nothing the rest of the day. Well, if you are in this environment and you have some part of the population who are just a bit more neurotic than the rest, they're like, they want a bit more. Well, the sad thing is that you take a few generations down the line, the neurotic one will have accumulated more fish, they will maybe have more kids, they become leader, or like they build a bigger hut, etc., etc. And so we're more likely that our ancestors were among these slightly more neurotic people who always want more, because why not, than people who were happy with their life. So that's a simple reason. Because evolution is a competitive process, it will, in a way, push to select organisms that always try to achieve the best in the environment. So it's not good enough it's not good enough. I mean, it's not a moral judgment at all, what I'm saying. From evolution point of view, I'm just saying that organisms who just survive, that's fine, but they'll tend to shrink in proportion of the population if you have genetic mutations which lead organisms to be more efficient, more driven, and looking always to achieve the best they can achieve. And so the key insights you get from this perspective is that we're not designed to be happy. Happiness is a tool to nudge us in the right direction, but this right direction is not just the right direction. Happiness is designed to nudge us to achieve the best we can. And so that's it. We're not designed to be happy. We're designed with happiness to achieve the best we can. Now, the best we can doesn't mean that we all climb the Himalaya, that we all aim to be a rock star, or that we all aim to be a top sprinter, because we know we can't. But it's going to be wherever we are, in a way our senses or thinking is going to be looking for, what is the best thing I can do? If you're not a super good sprinter, you will not try to become a champion in athletics, maybe, but there's plenty of other things you'll do. You know, in your local setting, given the specific skills that you have and your advantages, you're going to think, you know, what is the best thing I can do? And so happiness is going to kind of you're going to always look for happiness in, oh, if I want to do this thing, which looks like the best thing I can do. And in a way, nature puts happiness as a carrot to try and urge you to go there. That's the way it works.
It's like your brain tricking you to tell you you gotta do this, and then you're gonna be happy. But then when you actually do the thing, your brain is gonna tell you no, you're gonna do the other thing. Like, I find that the insight amazing.
Yes, so you're totally right. So this insight is called the focusing illusion. It's like the term, I think, was coined by Kahneman, or at least by a group of authors where Kahneman was from. And Kahneman, you know, is this famous behavioral economist who got the Nobel Prize in economics, and he wrote this bestseller, Thinking Fast and Slow, which really had a big impact on making behavioral economics popular beyond the discipline. And so the focusing illusion is that at a given moment in time, if you ask people what would make you happy, they may say, well, you know, there's really one thing in life would make me happy. And it could be, oh, I want a partner, you know, to build a family, or I want this great car, you know, because I love sports car, or I want this big house because I want to live in a big house along the sea, you know, that's what, beside the sea, that's what I want. So people will have this thing. Maybe I want to live in the sun. I want to move to California. That's really my dream. And then when people achieve these things, you ask them, oh, now are you happy now? And what you see, exactly as you said, is that people have moved on. Okay, I'm in California now. It's nice, but, you know, I want to do this. I want to be promoted in my job. So now, instead of being happy, as I said to you, I would be happy if only I was in California. I'm in California, and now I moved to something else. It's not just enough to be in California. I need more than that. And you know, it's one piece of the puzzle. I said that nature is kind of moving the cart along to nudge you to always go further. And if we were aware of that, that is, if we were aware that once we will be successful, the cart will move further away, then, you know, we might not be super motivated, because we might think, wait a minute, why am I working so hard to get this promotion? Now I think that that's a promotion, that's a kind of prestige and income that will really make me happy. But I know that once I get it, the cart will move forward, and I'll think that it's not enough. So why don't I just enjoy what I'm doing now, watch Netflix, play video games, and don't bother about working, you know, extra hours. So if we were aware that the cart is going to move, we may not be as motivated. So in a way, another thing that nature does, or evolution does, is that it makes us naive to this evolution. So we have this focusing illusion, because by believing now very hard that this is going to make us happy, we work very hard for it. And then once we get it, we are happy, we enjoy the thing. You know, if you get this promotion, you'll be happy 3 months, 6 months. But progressively, we adapt to it, we get used to it, and then we start looking ahead for new challenges. But the thing is that we didn't anticipate that before. So as you said, we're kind of naive to it, and it's not a flaw, it's not a bug, it's by design. It's a feature because as I said, we're not designed to be happy, but happiness is just this kind of system of valuation of incentives to make us work as hard as possible. And the goalposts are always going to move, because that's the best thing for nature to keep us motivated.
So, yeah, that's this. I love this topic. So here's where I want to ask you about where like meaning enters the equation, because it seems like happiness is like maybe a little bit more coupled with the process of getting nearer to our goals, let's say, or the process instead of achieving them. I might be wrong, but I think I feel that I'm more in touch with life, let's say, and more even, let's say, happy when I'm like getting nearer to my goal in the process than when I achieve the goal, let's say. So I think and throughout that process, I feel like I have something like meaning, let's say. Am I getting the idea of meaning right? Is that something that like people find in the process, or what is it?
Okay, very good question. And meaning is a complex thing because it is a term that can have a lot of meaning, a lot of different definitions. Maybe before I answer specifically about meaning, I can give you a bit more about the mechanics about how happiness works. The goalposts move all the time because the way our system of subjective valuations of subjective values, which makes us happy or unhappy, work. For it to be the most efficient as possible, it kind of tracks our expectations. So, the key things that we get from cognitive neuroscience and evolutionary theory as well is that the best possible system of valuation is a system of valuation which makes you, where you perceive big differences between things where you face, options or decisions that you face, but in the range of the outcomes that you're likely to face. So the idea here is that basically your valuation, you have a limited number of, a limited range of values that you can experience. And if you were in high school, you might remember you had a voltmeter. And once again, it has a limited range of values. And before doing experiment, you need to calibrate the voltmeter to put the voltmeter in the range that you want to measure for it to measure the right differences. And you can think of a system of happiness as the same thing. You have a range of differences, which your brain can compute very good, bad, very bad. And this range can be allocated to different type of outcomes. So if, for instance, you are in, you're in India and you have a food cart in the street, and you're selling food items for $1-2 at a piece. Well, your system of valuation should be, make a big difference. Like, is it $1 or $1.5? You don't want to lose 50% of the price of an item. And so you should be very discerning if you have like a tourist coming and trying to negotiate, you'll care about $0.50, and that doesn't matter. But then now your difference between very good and very bad, you'll say like 1.5, good, 1, not good enough. But then now if you think about somebody like Elon Musk, obviously Elon Musk, $1.5 or $1, what does he care? I mean, for that matter, Elon Musk, $1,000 or $1,500, it doesn't make the difference. Because Elon Musk, the same valuations would have to be in the relevant range for him. And the relevant range for Elon Musk may be, 1 billion more today or 1.5 billion more today. That's the kind of differences I care about. And so you can, once you see these two extremes, you can think about this for everything. So, the best way of allocating this range of valuations is for it to be centered around your expectation, around the kind of area you're in. So if your expectation is that on average you make decisions around $100, you should care about this range of income. If your decisions every day is about thousands of dollars, you should care about this range of income. And so the first thing about the goal, and here goes the goal, is that as you have a goal, the goal is maybe what you have identified as a thing you can go. As you progress to your goal, your expectations are going to change. And so initially you're far from your goal, and maybe let's say your goal is 100, and you're 0. Or maybe I should give you another example, maybe a more intuitive example. Like let's say you run a marathon. So your goal is just to finish the marathon. It's 42 kilometers. And you start at 0, and as you progress, you get information about your ability to reach your goals. That's going to change your expectations. Maybe as you start running a marathon, you think there is 80% chance I finish because, who knows, I could get an injury, I could get too tired, whatever. So maybe your expectation is 80% chance I finish. And as you progress, you are going to update, and let's say that you don't get injured, you're going to update upwards your beliefs. You can imagine that if you are 40 kilometers and you have only 2 kilometers to finish, you're pretty sure you're going to be able to finish. And so as your expectations change, once you get the information that you're doing better than your initial expectations, you get happy. You get happy not just when you cross the line. You get happy at 20 kilometers when you're not injured yet and you feel pretty good and you feel, I think I'm going to be able to make it. You're already happy at 20 kilometers. You're happy at 30 kilometers, and you think, you know what? Now I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to finish stuff. Maybe it's 95%. And when you are at the crossing line, basically at the margin, the additional information of crossing the line is very small because you already knew you were going to cross the line, a kilometer ago. And so you consume the success all throughout your progress toward the goal. You enjoy the experience that you are going to succeed all throughout your progress toward the goal. And that's why when you cross the line, often the feeling is a bit underwhelming because you already have consumed much of it, okay? And then, just crossing the line itself is not the thing that's going to change everything. So that's one reason why, you have these things about progressing toward a goal. But now I have to answer your big question about meaning. And, what is meaning? I think, and I wrote this thing on my Substack as well, that I think that the question about meaning we have is because we don't have this rule book about how happiness works. And I think that when we experience meaning is often the case where, if you ask yourself how things are going in your life, obviously there is a small happiness of the day. You wake up in a good mood in the morning, you have a nice cup of coffee, it smells good, you're warm. So this is good. But you can have kind of overarching assessment about your life satisfaction. Are you going in the right direction? If you were to say you enjoy every day because you play video games with your mates, but you don't have a girlfriend, and you start getting old, you may have conflicting feelings. Like your everyday feeling is like it's fun, but if I ask you about your life satisfaction, you think, well, I'm not sure I'm on the right track, right? And you can have plenty of things like that. Maybe you are not successful at school and you should invest more at school instead of watching too much TV, etc. So meaning, I think, is the kind of feeling that when you look at your life, you are going in these right directions. It's kind of happiness over a larger time scale. And we get these feelings when we think that we're progressing toward goals which are meaningful. Usually goals which are meaningful is because, our psychological traits or cognitive processes identify these as valuable. Now, I would say that all this is based on, it was valuable for our ancestors. So sometimes it's not necessarily valuable. And when I say valuable, I'm not making a judgment about whether it's good in modern life, but I'm just saying that you take the kind of software that we inherit from our ancestors. This software helps us identify goals to achieve, to be successful. And then I think if you are working through your lives and you're progressing toward these goals, and ask you how do you feel about your life satisfaction now, you will experience more this kind of feeling of meaning, because you're thinking you're going somewhere. So what's going to provide meaning? You can have like basic intuitions, having friends and being good in your community, because this is very important for success. We're social species. So having friends, social support, maybe not just having friends, but also being recognized by your friends, being recognized in your community, having a social status, a social recognition, and this being going up. If you think it's going up, it's good. Having a mate, getting along well with your mates, so you think that there's a prospect of continuing partnership, having children, and that going well. And all these things are the kind of thing that give people meaning. That's why often people experience meaning when they're contributing to their community, and as a consequence, they are recognized as being good social contributors, and I think this is a recipe. This is why we feel meanings, because of this overarching perspective. Are we going toward the direction of goals which are good? And good in once again, good from an evolution point of view. That's not evaluate. I'm not making a moral judgment here.
Yeah, I understand. So maybe what I'm getting is that maybe happiness is more like related to specific experiences, and maybe meaning is related to like stacking or a compounding of multiple like aspects of life, let's say. Am I right there? Or maybe happiness also have this like complex dynamic, let's say, because okay, let's just stay 1 second with meaning, because and maybe with happiness, because I feel they are related. So you brought up the case of maybe if I stay playing video games and maybe like my peers start like having partners, having families, having jobs, whatever, and they're like successful in this typical kind of metrics, let's say, and I don't. So there I find like there are two things that are regarding like more the side of unhappiness and yes, mainly unhappiness, because I feel like maybe um not finding having a goal that is too like too big for ourselves maybe can become overwhelming and give us some kind of happiness, let's say, in one level, and at the same time not being like in relationship with our peers or in the level of our peers, maybe also give us some kind of unhappiness by comparison. That's also another topic that you talk about. Am I getting near these reasons for unhappiness? Are these considered reasons for unhappiness? Like maybe not like comparing ourselves to people near us that are maybe in some better situations, and at the same time maybe having like goals that are too far away and maybe could become overwhelming and make us feel like frustrated instead of like being in a proximal zone of development, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree. Source of unhappiness. So, as I said, this range of valuation is kind of trying to track your expectations. So, when there is a mismatch between your expectations, what you do, and that what you do is much less than your expectations, you're going to be frustrated. So, frustration is a mismatch with your expectations. So, you're not frustrated, I assume, and I'm not, because I don't wake up in the morning thinking, oh, I'm not as rich as Elon Musk. Why? Because that's not in part of my expectations. So, I don't expect to be rich like Elon Musk. So I'm not frustrated not to be as rich as he is. But some people might. So Jeff Bezos might be thinking, oh, you know what? I'll be to be on the top of the ranking in the world, that whatever Forbes is giving. And so maybe he is frustrated not to be as rich as Elon Musk. But we don't, because it's not in the range of our expectations. But we all have expectations wherever we are. And so if we fail these expectations, we are going to be frustrated. It's going to be painful. Maybe your expectations was to be reaching this school music, where there's a competitive exam at the entrance, and you failed, and you think you let your parents down, you don't achieve what you wanted to do, you're very frustrated. Maybe your expectations was, to go out with these girls at the most beautiful girl in the school you wanted to go on, and she kind of not interested, you're disappointed. So it's all going to be relative to your expectations. And when you fail your expectations, it feels bad. And one thing you have to do is you have to readjust your expectations, and that is a painful thing, to readjust your expectations. Right? If you fail to do so, if you keep your expectations high, if you fight against it, there might be a mismatch, and in that case, you might be consistently frustrated. So normally you would expect that the system of happiness should not produce this. Because the system of happiness, as I say, nature doesn't care about you being happy, but nature doesn't want you to be unhappy all the time. Like, this, and by the way, I use nature as a person because it's the way we use as a metaphor, but obviously I don't think there is anybody there. But it's just the evolutionary process didn't design us to be happy, but it didn't design us to be unhappy. It just designed us for happiness to guide us towards the right decision. So there is no reason for us to be always miserable. But there might be aspects of the modern world which contributes to make us miserable. Like, our ancestors didn't have access to social media and to Facebook and to Instagram. And so what you have on Facebook and Instagram, you have a window on the life of many more people than before. And usually the algorithms are going to give the stuff that people want to see. So you're going to see people, who have, you can see the horrible thing, but you see a lot of things that, are unusual at the top of the social ladder, like people having cocktails in expensive restaurants, people going on holidays in faraway countries, which is very expensive to fly there, people having luxurious dresses, etc. And so, that's if you form your expectations based on what you see, well, that's going to maybe nudge your expectation upward. You have this expression on social media, the fear of missing out, the FOMO. So you watch all these things and you have that. And then even if you look within your social circles on Facebook or Instagram, people are going to select the picture. You put you take 50 selfies and you only put one on your post, right? You're not going to put the one where you're like, we're looking a bit weird, etc. You go on holiday, on vacations with your kids, and they scream half the time. But the picture you post is the smiling kids on the beach, and the family looks very happy, etc., etc. And then on top of this, now with technology, you have filters. So I could put picture of me, and I look 10 years younger, etc., etc. So now that's a world we're living in. And so if you form your expectations about what's a normal looking person, what's a normal life, what's a standard life for somebody like you, the risk is that, your expectations are nudged upward if you're not very careful, if you're not fighting against it, if you're not thinking, oh, wait a minute, obviously they post pictures of their family with happy kids because they don't put all the situations where there are a lot of tensions, etc. So if you don't fight against that, then your expectations could be moved up. And that can make you unhappy with your life, even if your life actually is totally standard, right? So that's one thing. And I think it also goes to your question about social comparisons, because one way for kind of our brain to adapt this range of values around our expectations is to our brain is going to try to we are going to try to always form the right expectations. What are the right expectations we could have about life? And a natural source of information are other people who are like us. So, if you consider the best people, for instance, were like you, or maybe your old friends from high school, you were in the same social environment, they had similar grades to you, etc. And then now if you go on Facebook and you see that one friend from high school is now the CEO of a big company in Silicon Valley, and is making millions of dollars, well, you may have mixed feelings about it. Maybe you like the guy, and it's great for him. But at the same time, something may tell you, wait a minute, he did that, and I didn't. And so, you may feel bad about the fact that you didn't do as well. And this is not being, spiteful or whatever. It's just because you're learning that this might have been within the realm of your possibilities. So if it was within the realm of your possibilities, why didn't you? In a way, you might be punished by, once you get information about people doing much better than you, it should nudge your expectation up. Why not doing like them, right? If they can, you might be as well. And so as a consequence, one frustration you get when you're on Facebook or Instagram and you see all these pictures of success and beautiful lives, etc., is that you suffer in comparison, because in a way, your brain might be telling you, wait a minute, why don't you have you also the same kind of life, luxury, happiness, beautiful family, etc. So that's the problem, is that social comparisons is a natural way for us to understand what is the expectations we can reasonably have. But with the social media, which we like Instagram and Facebook, etc., this social comparison, which is often a bit fake, and the information we get is very biased, is nudging us upward, which can make us potentially frustrated. And we have evidence. For instance, there were experiments on Facebook showing that girls who watch Facebook often, statistically, they tend to have a lower happiness or satisfaction with their body image, etc. And understandably, because people put Photoshop pictures on themselves, and so you end up having a vision of the natural human being, which is, you may be a totally normal person, then you end up at the bottom of this fake distribution.
Yeah, I feel like social media makes that unreachable carrot more real. No, it's like that carrot is more real than ever, because people are showing that they're successful, that they're drinking good drinks in the beach, and they're having these lives, and I'm happy, and you don't. So the carrot is there and it's real, and these people are so happy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's something that our ancestors didn't have, right? Because you step back 10,000 years ago, which is a very common, life setting throughout the history of humanity, and you would have a community of, maybe 50 to 150 people. Within your age group, you would have maybe like 20, 30 people. That's a kind of classroom setting, more like. It's a very different type of thing. And so that's,
Because
all psychology may not be ready for that.
I feel maybe even the fact that if it were like actual like direct groups of people, like maybe your family, your friends, like in our ancestors like context, let's say, versus the social media context, which is massive, but it's not really direct in a human kind of like experience, let's say. It's just like curated and superficial, let's say, and the values which are maximized are like superficial values, let's say, and it's so it's so much information that usually takes people to overwhelm instead of taking them towards motivation that maybe was what difference was supposed to do in a like typical context, like for our ancestors, let's say, where like someone being in a different situation or a better situation, like having a bigger or better capacity to do something, maybe like drives motivation, let's say, instead of frustration. And in that same topic, I remember you talking about this like same comparison, let's say, that we have in social media. We have like relatives or friends, but specifically inside the area of family, and how like maybe people who are like in better social positions usually have children where comparisons with their parents, let's say, are like might be overwhelming because to be better than them requires like a big jump or a big effort comparing in comparison with people who don't need too much effort to like be better than their peers or their family members or their parents. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think, your our brain, like our cognitive processes, should try to pick from the surroundings, all the relevant information to assess our expectations in life. So one big piece of information about what I can do is naturally my parents. So if I just, even without thinking of genetics, there's kind of the social opportunities that my parents have, I'm likely to have the same, or the same social network, etc. And so the achievements of my parents are natural points of comparison. So, when you're 30 and you say, am I doing well in life? Well, there are plenty of ways to answer that, but a natural anchor point to start answering these questions, are you doing better than your parents? That's a natural comparison point. So you can imagine that, let's say for the same level, let's say you're going to college in a good college, not a top prestigious college, but a good university. And, you got a master's degree in engineering, let's say. Now, let's consider different scenarios. If your parents were not educated, they didn't go to high school, they were working in factories on very low wages, they'll be very proud of you. That's a very good achievement to get to a master's degree in engineering. And naturally, you may feel like you have achieved something. You have moved in life upward. And when you look upon your achievements, you may have you may be quite serene in a way about what you've been doing, because this gives you an anchor point which is pretty low. And so you have made an upward journey. But then you take exactly the same thing, a master's degree in engineering, and your parents are, a university professor in MIT in mathematics, and, your mother is a lawyer, highly paid lawyer. And you got a master's degree in engineering from not top university, good, but not top university. Well, you may have a very different outlook on your achievements. In the engineering things, you're clearly not matching the level of your father. And, in income, you are also not likely to match the level of income of your family. And so you can't have the same outlook on that. I've done this journey, and this is where I started, and here's where I am. I'm happy. And so you may be more frustrated. And so there's a kind of a paradox here, is that starting from a very high social background, there is a kind of, if I say that, it sounds really bad, it sounds maybe over the top, but there's a kind of a curse of being from a high social, in terms of happiness. Obviously, it's going to help you, giving you a lot of advantages, and you're more likely to be successful in life if you're from a wealthy family than from a poor family. But if you don't look at your absolute success, if you look at your subjective satisfaction, well, the thing is that if you start from very high, you will have to achieve much higher to just feel okay. And so, in a way, and in particular in a world where there's been a huge extension of education, and so you've got plenty of people who before, their parents didn't go to university and they're going to university. Well, you have plenty of people who experienced social upward mobility, going from families who didn't have this experience to themselves going to higher education. Well, if you're already from a top family, well, the places in Harvard and MIT, they have not increased in number so much, right? So you see evidence that a lot of people from top families, they're often quite miserable, which leads to maybe sometimes some more risk-taking behavior, including drug taking, etc. And that's a reality. I don't want to, to paint it as a drama. That's not dramatic. And if anything, people who pull themselves up from a very poor social background, often go to much more difficult social situations. But it's true that if you take the perspective of happiness, we often don't anticipate that people from rich family might be maybe not super happy, because we, if we're not super rich, we would like to be them because it's above our expectations. But them being born in this background, this is their expectations. So they don't wake up every morning saying, "Oh, I'm super rich." They may benefit from some social comparisons downward when they look at the fact that other people are not as rich as them. But the fact that their parents are very wealthy may actually make it harder to be satisfied with their life. And one thing else that you see sometimes is that they can choose to do some different things in life. So if your father is a mathematics professor at MIT, you might not want to try to do mathematics because the chance that you do better is maybe pretty slim. So do you want to be always under the shadow of your father who has better achievement? Maybe you want to do something else. Maybe you want to do art. Maybe you want to be a novelist, to write novels. And like that, you will be in a very different domain where you will escape the comparison.
Yeah, another thing that you find in rich people is that they tell you like, this is not it. Money is not it. They always tell you that the carrot is fake. They will tell you that like, there's another thing. I feel empty.
Yeah, there was. I remember hearing an interview from a psychologist who is specialist of the life of millionaires and multimillionaires, and people were telling him, but what kind of job is that? Like they're not unhappy. They can't be unhappy. They're rich. And he said, well, actually, they're very unhappy because first they're often very alone. So when you're rich, apart from the friends who knew you maybe before you were rich, or maybe who were rich also when you're young, whatever, the problem, you attract a lot of people who are around you. You may always wonder why people are around you. Is it that they like you personally, or that they're interested, etc.? And so that creates, it's the same thing with power. If you get elected president of the United States, why is it that people are around you and telling you that you're great? Is it that they want favor, for instance, or they really think that you're great? And so there is one issue about loneliness in these circles, but also something that we underestimate is that if you take a distribution, most distribution are like normally distributed, there's a statistical distribution. And when you look at the tail, at the upper the side when the upper extreme of the distribution, the distance between observations tend to be larger. So that's an interesting fact, that if you look at the top, the difference between the highest achiever and the second achiever is on average larger than in the middle, the difference between, I don't know, the 1000th achiever and the 1001 achiever. What does this mean? Well, I can tell you, you can see this in the Olympics, that often the best performer is, much better than the second performer. So you think, how is it possible that the best one is so hard, and the best one is able to put, a few more seconds between himself and the second one when it's actually the limit? Well, if it's distributed like that, you'll have bigger differences between the top performers. So now if you think about wealth, you have the same thing. The difference between the richest person and the second richest person is going to be large. But all through this distribution, the difference between millionaires is also large. So we may think that, if you had 10 million, you will be happy. But the person who has 10 million and has a very nice house, and maybe has a very nice yacht, and maybe several houses, and travel all around the world during his life, this person sees that what is around in the distribution of wealth. Well, there's guys who are less poor, fine, but there's guys who are richer, and these guys are far away, because above 10 million, they are going to be having 50 million. And at 50 million, the guy doesn't have a nice yacht. He has a massive kind of, industrial size yacht. He has a mansion, like royalty. And so that's a big difference. So, they can experience the difference. They can experience that, oh, I'm not like them. You can always look up. And the guys with 50 million, you'd think is amazing. But, you can look at the guys who are like 200 million and $500 million and several $1 billion, etc. And so what we often don't appreciate that these people suffer from the same social comparisons, and they may also be frustrated. And it's not just in money. He said that eventually, he says it's not just money. Eventually, when you have so much money that you can buy, all these things like having a house and a huge yacht, etc. You want more. You want social. You have other things like social recognition. That's why a lot of these top billionaires, they give a lot of charity, because what do I need 1 more billion in my bank account? Let's have 30 billion. What is 1 more billion in my bank account? It's not going to make a big difference. But what can I get? Well, I can get social recognition. I give money to NGOs, and I go to around the world, and people talk about me as being good, etc. That's a different type of experience I can enjoy, which we were talking about meaning before. You think I'm contributing to the community, I can feel good about that. And then if I only have 50 million, I can't give so much money to the NGO. So maybe I feel like, I can still suffer in comparisons to the billionaire who has all this extra social status by giving billions to good causes. So it's never ending.
One interesting thing about meaning and this kind of distribution is like, I heard John Vervaeke. Do you know him?
I don't think so. I might, but I'm not sure.
He had a video series. You're gonna love it. It's called "Awakening from the Meaning Crisis."
Okay.
And I heard like a lecture from him where he was talking about specifically meaning and how usually like people think when they a lot of people, I think it was a study in the UK, and like more than half people thought their lives were like meaningless, let's say, right? In that study. So when they asked them what they thought would make them like have more meaningful lives, they usually said that money was the first thing that came to mind. Like having money would give me a more meaningful life. And that actually, once you have money and the result of having money isn't that you are now having a meaningful life, and actually like having more meaning from having more money. Let's say once you have money, you need like tons of money to make like a little bit, like for people to feel like just a little bit more of meaning in their life. So I feel like this is like the same thing, or is connected just a little bit. And what I wanted to ask about the topic you were just talking about, the distribution of what wealthy people. What is it that they actually do to find meaning? Do they just go into charity and those kinds of stuff, or how, like people who have this like giant comparison with the next, the people who has more money than them? How do they actually find like more happiness or more well-being? Like, given that getting that amount of money is hard, how do they actually get it?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I think maybe people do it differently. Uh, and I might just go back to you had the question about like why you when you get some money, you need more money to get more happy. And I guess there's at least two different things here. One thing is that once you get, the world is scattered to the kind of specific type of spendings. So once you have like a lot of money, you can have a big house, but there's so much thing you can do with a house. I mean, you can always more and bigger and more luxurious. That's true, but in terms of just enjoying a house, and same thing for boats, whatever. So there's limited things that if you have a huge amount of wealth that you can change in your life. Like I think Elon Musk, by the way, I think he doesn't have a big house. I mean, it's we can call that in economics conscious signaling, that when you're so rich, you can actually decide not to engage in the race because everybody knows you're rich. So by not engaging in the race for having bigger stuff, you actually show to people that you're even on top. Like, that's why like Steve Jobs, when he was, or Mark Zuckerberg, when they present their stuff, they are dressed in jeans, and t-shirt. They are super rich, but they don't come in.
Is that the red sneakers, the red sneakers concept?
I have to look at the concept. In economics, we call that counter signaling. So people try to signal that they're good, but when you're very much on top, you can actually prove that you're on top by not signaling. So I don't even need to try to tell you that I'm rich because you all know I'm rich. Not like these guys. These guys, they need to show off because otherwise you wouldn't be sure if they're rich. But me, so I don't even need to do that. It's kind of, so another thing is that, as I said, the distribution is sparsed in the top income. So if what you care about is climbing the kind of ranks, the social ladder, an additional dollar is not going to carry you far when you're already rich. So, if you start initially, if you get $1 million, you kind of climb very quickly the distribution from maybe, bottom 10% to, whoa, I gave you $1,000 of assets, and right away you may be already in top 10%, top 10 or top 20%. But if I give you another million, you're going to need to move to maybe the top 5%. And another million, you maybe top 1%. But another million, you're going to not move very much. Eventually, 1 million doesn't, maybe you move not at all because the next guy is like 10 more million than you. Okay, so that's why when you have more money, if what you care also about is your social rank, this is not going to move you much as you get richer and richer. So that was to explain why money has this reduced impact as you get richer on your satisfaction. But you ask, what do they do to find meaning? I think that they do care. People care. Money is not the primary driver of our thing. Money as kind of resource is valuable. We want resources. We prefer to have food on the table than no food on the table. That's true. But above some level of resource, we don't need more. Just so it's in terms of, as I said, basic stuff, having food, having drinks, being warm, etc., being safe. You can have that you don't need to be millionaire for that. If you look at the US, middle income, reasonable middle income from if you're an employee or office worker, you will get good food on the table. You'll get good drinks on the table. You'll, get air conditioning in your home, etc., etc. So all the additional money, I think it's not about resources. It's not primarily about resources. The other thing that we care about is status, because status is a key aspect which would have been valuable to our ancestors. Status is your social recognition, how other people think of you. And problem with status is never ending. Because as I say, you know, food on the table, there's a given amount of food, you say, stop, I don't want to eat more, okay? But status is never ending. The status is a race. You know, if I get status, people around me lose relatively, because I gain status, people give me more recognition, I will get more social attention. But attention is scarce. Not everybody can be talking about everybody at the same time. If everybody talks about Lionel Messi, the footballer, well, they're not talking about Kylian Mbappe. Okay, so, you know, like, who are they talking more about? Here's the thing. And in the same thing, if everybody's talking about Elon Musk, then they're not talking about Jeff Bezos. And so the problem is that when you start being very rich and your focus is not about resources, but it's about, it's a lot going to be about status, prestige, your social ranking, etc. So they do care about, you know, it sounds silly maybe, but they do care about the rankings like Forbes, who is on the top of the ranking of the wealth. They care about who is recognized, and recognition can be who's making the, you know, the front page of the Time magazine, the person of the year, and, you know, who is invited in what kind of big events, who was at the inauguration of Donald Trump and in what box, you know. They care about this kind of thing, or who was the first to send rockets and to fly in space. Was it Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos? You know, and they had this kind of race. And so now it looks childish, but we understand that this is just driven by the same thing. The same thing that we care about status when we were in high school. Who was a kind of cool kid? We wanted to be in the cool kid group, and we would have liked to be the coolest kid in the cool kid group, etc. And this never ends. Okay, and that drives things. And status can be doing these things. It can be acquire a football club in Britain. It can be buying newspapers and having your views, you know, being influential in politics. All these things, you understand them when you understand that what's driving them is not anymore resources, is being social recognition. That's the driver.
Yeah, because I mean, that's the Maslow pyramid is still like valid inside like psychology and behavioral science, let's say, because it seems like we're talking about the same thing. Like, I mean, you have the basic needs, and then you start like getting that like more abstract and more like maybe I like to call them like maybe deeper or less like superficial, less like fundamental, let's say, or more fundamental. I don't know. Once you get like your basic needs covered, you just start like scaling towards like more abstract kinds of development, let's say. I mean, status, and then I don't know whatever comes next, like self, like spiritual development. I don't know which one. I think that it ends all there, right, in the Maslow pyramid. And I was thinking about this when you were talking about how the changes in money, like more money, you need more money to move like just a little bit the needle. I know in individuals maybe it happens like a lot more is needed to make like a small change in how we feel about life or happiness, let's say. And I know that also there's this like social concept of I don't know if you heard about the Easterlin paradox.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Because it's strange, because I mean in what apparently as like the standards of living rise, also like expectations rise too, and it seems like these people are going through the same kind of process.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to ask mainly is, do you think that unhappiness as a collective thing has like risen in the last few years, like since we live like this more like comfortable, let's say, lives?
Yeah, so you asked first about the Maslow pyramid. So I'll start with this. So the Maslow pyramid, this idea by Maslow, I think was a psychologist, I think,
Yeah.
that, you know, happiness initially is like to cover your basic needs, you know, food, shelter, and they were highly, once you have that, then you care about other things. And I don't remember what's at the top. You might remember maybe spirituality or something like this. So I don't know what the consensus is psychology. I suspect that people see that it's a bit outdated as a view, the Maslow pyramid in scientific psychology. I personally think that there's a kind of a hint of truth in these ideas that you start from basic needs to other things. But I also think that likely it's based on a lot of the intuitions now. We would put things differently. For instance, I think the view that you go from like basic physical needs to higher spiritual needs, I don't think it's accurate. That it also mapped an old view from Aristotle or John Stuart Mill, all thinkers, that there are higher level of goods. So that there's a difference between enjoying a chocolate bar and enjoying opera. There's something better, higher in quality in the opera than in the chocolate bar. Or for that matter, enjoying watching a sitcom, with a laughing track and it's funny, to enjoying, I don't know, an art piece in the museum. And I think goes into this kind of higher level of satisfactions and meaning. When you take an evolution perspective, you have to think about, I think it's useful as a razor to cut through all the possible explanation. So I don't see an evolutionary reasons why you would care about spirituality per se, why your psychology should be like. I do understand why you would care about the first fundamental need. You need to have food, you need to have shelter, these are valuable, and that's the kind of priority. That's totally natural. But as you climb, this thing that you get, the priority, I don't think that the top would be anything like spiritual, or because spirituality for spirituality, it's not clear why it would help you be successful. And if it helps eventually, it has to be part of a bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that beyond these basic needs, the next things are going to be social concerns, such as having friends, having support, and then being recognized by other people, social recognition. And I think that social recognition, once we understand that people care about it and people enjoy it, it really explains plenty of things. Because social recognition, people can chase social recognition in a Machiavellian, cynical way, and some people do. Politicians, might be sometimes very explicit about the fact that they just want power and being famous, etc. But even if people often chase recognitions, it's kind of blended with non-purely cynical motives. Like you may want to sell a lot of cakes at your with your scout group, right? And it's for a good cause, but also by selling cakes, you'll be recognized as being good in the community by the priest in your church, etc. So, it doesn't have to be. It can be blended with other things, and a lot of things that we do, they have this kind of. We understand why we behave the way we do when we understand the big picture. And I think maybe a good way of being more precise about it is. We have a distinction in evolutionary theory between what we call proximate motive and ultimate motive. And the ultimate motive is why we do things, because from an evolutionary point of view, it helps us being successful. So maybe, when you're a school captain, a scout captain, and you sell a lot of cookies, and you can come back to your church and look at, if it's a religious scout organization, you come back and you say, look, we have sold a lot of cookies. The ultimate explanation will be, you get social recognition, you get prestige, you get status in your community, and status is good. Maybe you're more likely to get a girlfriend as a consequence. But that doesn't mean that you need to have these hooks in your head. As I said, nature doesn't give you the rule book. Nature doesn't need to tell you, this is why you're doing things. And so you can have proximate motives, which are what's in your head, which is different from the ultimate motive. So maybe as a school captain, you really enjoy selling cookies and thinking that you're achieving something good for your community, and having these motives, having this feeling that, I like doing things for my community. Well, it's nice because it's paired with the rewards of prestige, etc. But you don't need to do, the school captain or the scout captain doesn't need to be cynical about it. But once you understand this ultimate logic, you can see how it pervades a lot of things in our lives. What we do in our work, in the family, in the community, that is driven a lot by social recognition, prestige, etc.
I actually found the pyramid, and then I say something about that. It's
good.
It's like it wasn't spirituality, though it might be spirituality for someone, but it's actually self-actualization. So you have physiological needs.
So I do
safety needs, belongingness and love needs, let's say, then esteem needs that maybe are something like status, and then self-actualization. It might be spirituality.
So do you remember how would you define self-actualization though?
Yeah, it's really strange. It actually says something like, it's really abstract. So it's achieving one's full potential, including creative activities, let's say. So
you see what I mean?
It's abstract.
I think, as I say, yeah. So I think it's one of these things where there's a hint of truth, as I said before, but I would still put it as a kind of the blind touching part of the elephant, because now self-actualization, there's one meaning which is perfect, makes perfect sense from the perspective I've given you, is that we should be designed to identify our potential, the best thing we can do, and to try to achieve it. So there is a feeling of self-actualization when you get the feeling that you are doing your best. Thinking that, having the feeling that, yes, I'm achieving the best thing I can. That's good. That's fulfilling, because nature designed us like that. But it's not really at the top of a pyramid. It's not the last thing you're thinking of. I mean, obviously you need to survive first, but in all societies, we have the conditions of survival. I think once you have the conditions of survival, like there's a minimum, everybody will be driven trying to do the best. I mean, in some cases, people may not be able to, or people may have conditions which prevent them, etc. But it doesn't have to be, we don't all aim to be Elon Musk, but whether we are, identify at the top of where we are, what the best thing we could do. It could just be being successful in a family, having successful family. Or it could be managing to repair your car, which is broken, and you care about your car. And as you feel that you're achieving these things, you'll feel good. So the self-actualization of the problem I see is that that's kind of very abstract feeling. And it sounds a bit like, this kind of higher thing to achieve. But I think it's very concrete. It's more like the feeling about getting the feeling that I'm doing the best I could. I have no regret about what I'm done.
Yeah. So,
I feel we cover a lot of ground. No, this was an excellent talk with a lot of data. I found your insights really fascinating. So I want to really thank you for this.
Thank you, Ronan.
Me too. And maybe just one last thing about, I think maybe people who are confused about this topic maybe would like to know if you have something would you consider that something specific about how to have a more fulfilling, more happy life, let's say? Would you think it's you could put it in a simple comment, let's say?
Yeah. So, the system is gamed against us in the sense that as I said, we're not designed to be happy. So, we have to. I mean, there are ways to be happy. There are ways to be happy is to game the system by, you can take substances or whatever. So you can get some level of some types of satisfaction. The problem is that these type of satisfactions can conflict with our long-term views. So, if you take a lot of drugs, you may feel good in the moment, but then 10 years later, you look and you say, oh my God, what have I done? I've wasted my life, etc. So it's hard. The system of satisfaction is not done for us to achieve this kind of always perpetual level of happiness. Having said that, I think with this perspective can give us some insights about the likely traps that we face in the modern world, because there's a mismatch between the modern world and lot of some aspects of the modern world and our psychology was designed for a different world. And a key feature of the modern world is that our lifespan and our life horizon is much longer now. So we live longer. I mean, it's hard to think back, but life expectancies were only 35. I think in the 19th century or even like middle of the 20th century. I'm not sure middle of 20th century, but I think 19th century it was 35-year-old life expectancy was very, very short. A lot of that obviously was death in young age, but nonetheless. So your low life expectancy also, people were, having a lot of illnesses, etc., etc. When you have a short time span, it means that you need to get ready early. In the 19th century, kids were working in Britain, in mines, in factories, etc. When you have a longer time span, what we have is that we have extended in a way the time of youth, of pre-adulthood. If you were to define really proper adulthood as a time when you enter the professional world, that you work on your own, the university in a way extends school, and we still behave a bit like kids as we're at university, like we're not paying, we're not getting money for ourselves. Usually your parents are paying most of it, or we're borrowing, and, at some time later, we'll have to pay back. And so the time horizon is now much further away from us, like our life. And it takes much longer to reach, to race towards what's going to give us eventually a place in society, and which would determine whether we're being successful or not successful. So we have this challenge because, we're not necessarily ready for that, for this kind of slow pace, etc. In particular, boys, which didn't have to go through education, and psychologists, often they lack maturity at an early age to be willing to go through the hoops, etc. And at the moment, boys are less successful than girls in education. And joined with that, you have the fact that the modern world has provided massive amount of ways of entertaining and having short-term satisfaction. Okay, so you have this big gap between the need to be able to invest in your future over decades. You have to, when you're 8-year-old, your parents says you need to work because to get a good job. But wait a minute, when is this job? It's maybe at 25. I mean, when you're 8-year-old, 25 is like an eternity. Okay. And when you're 25 and you start working, you need to save money for when you're 60 or 65. Okay. These are time span that our ancestors were not considering at all. And our psychology is not calibrated for that. And at the same time, society is producing the markets because kids can buy or can get their parents to buy, have generated a tremendous amount of ways to tap into our psychology to get pleasure now. You can feel video games, you can social media, and they're very addictive. And they're designed, by the way, by behavioral scientists who make them addictive. And so you have these kind of tensions, this terrible tension. And I think that, if I was to give one advice, is to be aware of that there's a trap here between this, requirement for long-term investment in modern society, which we're not necessarily well calibrated to appreciate, and this enticement of very short-term satisfaction, which can come at the cost of long-term investment. I may play too much video games and not work on my exams, and that's my psychology tells me that's what I want to do now. The problem is that 10 years later, I'm going to look back and say, well, what did I do? Why did I do that? Like, I had high scores at games that nobody play anymore, nobody cares. My accounts disappeared, so I wasted my life. So I think that's a key insight that you get, is that you have a key evolutionary mismatch here.
That's great, Lionel. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. It was amazing.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Anand.